Welcome everyone. My name is Pietro and this is the story of how Bloodborne changed my whole life forever. Before I get into how Bloodborne played such a pivotal role in my life, I think it's important that I give you guys a little background on myself. I was born in Sicily, an island in Italy, 27 years ago. I have always been an avid gamer since I was a child, like many other people. However, I never thought that a game would play such an important role in my life. Skipping ahead a few years, I was 19 years old and I felt lost. I was still living in Sicily at the time and I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life. I thought about many different potential avenues or paths, but nothing seemed to appeal to me deeply. I just felt bored and uninspired by every possible prospect of my future. One day, in 2016, my brother, who had moved to London a few years prior, invited me for a little getaway trip to see him. When he decided to leave Italy, I struggled quite a lot. We were very close. We played video games together, watched anime, and hung out more than most brothers would. When he left, I had to get used to life without him and it wasn't easy. He thought that being exposed to a new culture and environment might inspire me or lead me towards new paths, so after some convincing, I decided to visit him in London and start from the bottom. I was 19 years old. I found a job in a restaurant as a kitchen porter. Life was pretty difficult and lonely at the time. It was my very first serious job, and I worked between 50 and 60 hours a week. That might be considered normality for most people, but I wasn't used to that at all. It was a very unpleasant job, physically exhausting, with very long hours and not so nice people. I was still very unsure about my future and, if anything, I felt the same way I felt back in Italy, just more generally tired and without the comfort of all my friends and family. Aside from my brother, who I occasionally saw whenever possible, my other source of comfort was video games. I would play after work, when I wasn't too tired, and just get lost into whatever world I was playing in. I felt quite alone throughout that period, and I often had the feeling that it was me against the world. I had to work a job I didn't like in order to make money. I had to be nice to managers that were rude to me in order to keep my job. I had to fit into society, no matter how much I disliked it. Overall, I felt like a powerless outcast, a guy who didn't belong where he was, and that could do nothing to change his current situation. Something that helped me relieve that frustration a little was video games. And well, I've played loads of games during that period, but only one had a massive impact on me and my future. That game is Bloodborne. So, how? How did Bloodborne impact me and my future more than any other game I've ever played? To explain that, I need to first describe what I think its message is. It's important to point out that this is my personal opinion, and I'm not saying that this is objectively the only or most important message that the game conveys. Just the one that I connected to the most internally. When I first started the game, I was intrigued to know what I was getting into. As I watched the first cutscene of the game, I was already asking myself a lot of questions. Who is this guy in a wheelchair? What is he doing to me? Why is there a werewolf coming out of a pool of blood? And why the hell did he self-combust into flames? I kinda felt relieved about that part, but a moment later these weird alien-like creatures started to crawl all over me, and there and then I started missing the werewolf. Let's just say that the very first cutscene left me with loads of unanswered questions. I felt compelled to know more, to explore and find out what was going on. Then, as the hunter got up from his bed, I thought to myself, alright, let's do this. This game is going to be fun. And in hindsight, let's just say that I was so wrong and so right at the same time. Sure, the game was incredibly fun, but also incredibly frustrating and just so hard. Keep in mind that this was my first Soul game ever. The instant I saw Yharnam, I felt so alone. The world felt so dark and so cold. I couldn't help but notice a familiar feeling. For some reason, even though I knew nothing about the hunter or the game's lore just yet, I felt like I could relate to the hunter's experience. Throughout the game, I died a lot, but really like a lot. Enemies felt very hard and unforgiving. I was so surprised to see that I didn't just have new blood vials upon respawning, but I had to farm them and manage them carefully. And obviously the bosses. The bosses felt insane to fight at first. So fast, so much damage, so intimidating, and overall, just incredible movesets and aggression. I was never pushed into a corner by a video game so much in my life before. The whole experience of exploring, fighting, and dying just to try again felt very similar to my daily routine at the time. Wake up, go work at a job you hate, bite your tongue, get exhausted, and do it again the next day. The more I played the game, the more I felt I related to the overall experience the game was offering me. However, as I kept failing and failing over and over again, I realized that, together with frustration, I felt eagerness. Eagerness to go back and defeat whoever stood in my way. I started discovering the pleasure of honing my skills in order to succeed, learning to read the patterns of my enemies, understanding their weaknesses, learning to be patient. I was slowly developing the mindset that Soul games require in order to succeed. Exhausted after work, often well past midnight, I would switch on my PS4 and be so happy to just be immersed in the world of Bloodborne. Wearing my headset and playing in complete darkness as I explored Yharnam and all of its mysteries. All of a sudden, the city didn't feel like such a lonely place anymore. It felt alive, so alive. And I felt excited, genuinely excited about all the things there were to see and to do. The NPCs to talk to, the quests to follow. But most of all, I was excited about demolishing anything and anyone that stood in my way. It's clear to me now that the game was allowing me to live a similar life to what I wanted outside of it, And no, I don't mean the horrible scary beasts or weird Cthulhu-like horrors from beyond, but the incredible feeling of walking down a path that is your own. A path where you are in charge of the choices you make. No doing things you don't like. No sucking up to anyone. No lowering your head in obedience. Just a world where, despite failure still existed, giving up was simply not an option. You just had to keep going and going until you made it. That's what was missing from my life. At that point, I felt like I had found in myself the strength that was required to fully dedicate my time and energy towards something. But I still didn't know what that something was. What did I want from life? What did I want from my future? Many months went by and I still didn't know. Until one day, the answer became clear as daylight. I wanted to make people feel the way I felt playing Bloodborne. I wanted them to feel less alone.
Would you ever think to love me? Of course. I do love you.
Less frustrated.
Welcome home, good hunter.
To have something incredible to look forward to. I wanted to teach them and convey a message that held importance to me. Something that would make me feel proud and help others at the same time. And that's why, in the end, I decided I would become a game developer and create games myself. There it was, finally. I had found my long-searched goal, my ambition. However, just like in Bloodborne, knowing what your goal is doesn't mean having achieved it. That was only the first step. I decided to study all there was to learn about making games at the university. So I started applying to several different ones. I learned English recently, and in order to get accepted, there were tests that needed to be passed. I sent a total of 5 applications to 5 different universities. 2 of these allowed me to proceed to the next stage. Being a course about video games, for this next stage I had to write an essay about my favorite video game of all time. I had to explain why I chose that game and what I believed the game did well and what it did poorly. The pressure was high. I finally knew what I wanted from life. My goal was set and I was working hard towards it. I spent countless hours over the course of several days writing that essay, going into immense detail about Bloodborne. I decided to focus my attention specifically on 2 aspects of the game that I believed to be the most inspiring. Move forward despite the odds, and appreciate those who are there for you. Let's begin with the former. I think that anyone who has ever played a Souls-like before will know what it means to keep fighting despite the odds are often stacked against you. I clearly remember how Bloodborne made me feel when I was playing it. More often than not, I thought to myself things like, how am I supposed to take on that massive beast? Or, this guy is just way too aggressive, I don't even have time to heal. On top of all the incredibly powerful enemies, I also had to worry about finishing my blood vials and bullets on a regular basis. Having to take time to farm them and prepare a huge stack so that I was ready, it was quite a different type of gameplay compared to what I was used to. The level design was also ruthless. I would often feel like I didn't have too much space to move around or dodge enemies, especially when in groups. Overall, the game did a great job at making me feel beaten and powerless many times. However, despite all of that, Bloodborne also did an amazing job at making me feel like I just had to keep going. I just had to move forward and succeed, no matter how many tries it would take. It's hard to explain why I felt that way. I suppose that's the beauty of the Souls franchise. There is just something incredibly beautiful about overcoming imposing challenges and struggling more and more, fighting tooth and nail in order to eventually win. The other point I touched on in my essay was just as important. Appreciating those who are there for you. I can't express how calm and cradled I felt when going back to the hunter's dream. After dying more times than I could count, just walking around in the hub area and talking to the doll made me feel like everything was going to be okay. It made me feel like no matter how many times I failed, I would always have someone to fall back on. Not many video games, in my opinion, can craft such a strong feeling of nostalgia, sadness, happiness, all at the same time. When finally the day of submission came, I was pretty anxious to send it. For some reason, I felt like failing at that moment would mean that I wasn't ready for the challenge, that I didn't have what it takes to make it happen. However, I remembered what I learned from Bloodborne. All the sweat, effort and fatigue always pays off in the end. So I sort of forced myself to press the submission button, and then I stood there staring blankly at my laptop screen for a couple of minutes before going on with my day. A few days later, I received a response from one of the universities. I had failed to pass. For a moment I felt despair. I gave my all and it wasn't enough. However, I pulled myself together, kept learning about how to create games in my spare time by watching YouTube videos and waiting patiently for my last chance from the only university left. A few more days passed and I finally received the email. I was really scared to open it, but I eventually did. I remember reading it and thinking, why do these emails always go on and on and on before actually getting to the point? I just want to know, come on. Skimming through the page, I finally reached the answer. I had passed. I was so happy. I got accepted, and not only that, but one of my future tutors, having read my essay, complimented me about it. I felt so accomplished and so incredibly happy. I started imagining how my life would be at the university, all the amazing people I would meet, the incredible games I would get to play and create, and all the inspiring teachers who had years of experience ready to share their knowledge. For the first time in a long time, I felt like my life wasn't just a nightmare stuck in a horrible loop like the hunters, but I had broken free from it and I was slowly but surely heading towards my dream. Well, here I am now, several years later. I am still walking my path, and of course, no dream worth chasing is easily achievable. I managed to graduate from university with highest honors. I now work as a game developer, which I love. And most importantly, I have found incredible friends who supported me and continue to support me throughout my journey. I don't feel alone anymore. I haven't for a long time, in fact. My new goal now is to one day open my own video game company and create video games that are purely driven by passion and inspiration, hoping that my legacy can one day be of help to those who need it, just like Bloodborne did for me. If my future games will help even just one person when they're struggling and in a moment of need, I will consider that a great accomplishment. I don't know how my life would have gone if I never played Bloodborne. Maybe I would have still decided to become a game developer, for different reasons. Maybe another game would have kept me company during my lonely months. Or maybe not. Maybe if I never played it, I would have never gone down this path, and now I would be doing something completely different with completely different people. I might have never met my best friends and many other important people along the way. It's truly impossible to say. However, one thing I do know is that I will forever be grateful to how things have played out. To my brother for asking me to move to London. To my friends and family for supporting me along the way. And finally, I will always feel extreme gratitude towards all the developers of From Software and of course Miyazaki himself for having created truly one of the best video games the world has ever seen. Perhaps the very best. One that, despite conveying so much darkness and coldness, also made me feel warm and accompanied during a difficult time. One that, even though it's designed to make the player fail over and over again, it does it with the intention of teaching them an important lesson. Truly, thank you from the bottom of my heart. It's not an overstatement to say that Bloodborne has truly changed my life forever, for the better. And for that, it will always hold a special place in my heart as my favorite game of all time.